Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 700 videos on monster ecology, fantasy world history, character classes, and magic items on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button below or backing me on Patreon where you get access to all the full scripts I write for these vids. Members of either also become members of the Secret of Gluminati on my Discord server, and of course, subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week and have a live stream every weekend. The ancient Empire of Imaskar is mentioned often in my videos, as well it should be, as one of the greatest human civilizations ever to rise up on the world of Toril. At its apex, it more than rivaled ancient Netheril for its incredible magical power, but in so many ways, it was a very different culture, and unlike Netheril's literal fall, the end of the Imaskari story and its people is far from over. To start this tale, we have to travel far back in time, thousands and thousands of years. To give some idea of the timescale here, at this current time in the Forgotten Realms, the official year is 1492 Dale Reckoning, which is 1750 AD on Earth. Why do we know the exact date on Earth compared to Toril? Well, it's thanks to the Imaskar civilization, but more on that later. So when we travel back to the very dawn of the Imaskari people as a nation, we are going back to minus 8350 DR, which on Earth was 8092 BC, which means on our planet, most people around the world still lived in scattered hunter-gatherer communities which remained firmly in the Paleolithic. The population of all humans on Earth was somewhere between 20 and 30 million. Farming of crops was just getting into tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, and sunflowers. People were just learning how to make coiled mud wood-fired pottery. Planting and harvesting techniques were transferred through Asia Minor and across the Aegean Sea to Greece and the Balkans. The techniques were, in the main, cultivation of wheats and barleys and domestication of sheep, goats and cattle. The heart of civilization was the Fertile Crescent above Mesopotamia. Meanwhile, on Faerun, Imaskari tribes began to settle the highly fertile Ruran Plateau, and their civilization went from wandering tribes of mainly advanced livestock herders to an agrarian society which developed extremely quickly based on the technological dominance of those who used engineering and magic in combination with each other. The Imaskari people were generally shorter and had swarthy skin. Cultures shared much with the Durpari ancestry. They had a love of commerce, practiced fair and honest business, and exhibited racial tolerance in their dealings. They organised their society around the merchant house or chaka, which we would call a business, brand or corporation. They had a very capitalistic outlook and valued freedom and liberty for their citizens, except they also saw nothing wrong with the practice of slavery. Personal value was based on the prosperity one could achieve as opposed to familial lineage. Lax business regulation was reflected in the societal trust in the virtue and integrity of market practices. The average Imaskari was literate, educated, and had a natural affinity for and appreciation of magic. Like the Durpari, the Imaskari commonly used illusion and divination in their business practices day to day. They saw magic as a tool to aid in commerce, often employing illusions to provide lavish comforts to trading partners, or divination to predict future market trends and identify safe caravan routes. The Imaskari were not sea traders. They had no navy or merchant marine activity. They employed basic fishing boats without sails and didn't venture into open deep water. They made common use of magical technology that emulated a lot of the modern convenience of present-day Earth, such as hot and cold running water, plumbing, central heating, food preservation, instant communications over great distances, and probably the most incredible aspect of that technology was a mastery of portal travel that was very much like the sci-fi show Stargate. Their portals were based on a design using a circle of massive bronze spires etched with intricate Batrachi runes taken from the ruins of the long-lost amphibian creator race. Their mastery of transdimensional magic gave them an incredible tactical advantage against any military action against their territory, and no large-scale invasion ever managed to overcome their ability to mount an immediate and overwhelming counteroffensive. With their transportation of legions of troops in the blink of an eye from any area of their lands to another. As soon as those spires rose up, the lands around them were basically the property of the Imaskari people from then on. This ease with which they used magic meant that, like the Durpari, the Imaskari were seldom fazed by the extraordinary, a virtue that extended into a proclivity for exploration into the unknown and an extended period of rapid advancement in the magical and technological arts. Their ruins to this day are infamous for their techno-magical constructs, random effects of portal seepage, and infestations of aberrations and monstrosities, along with wondrous items that tend to baffle scholars as to their function and safe operation. It's kind of funny that an Imaskari would know how to build a device capable of projecting a force field and a handheld rod capable of releasing a bolt of radiant energy, while routinely stepping through two-way teleportation circles, but a simple sailing boat would baffle them, and they would marvel at something like a crossbow or a windmill. The foundation of their technology was very different from anything seen in the history of Earth. To them, a flying carpet whistling overhead was normal, and a combustion-driven motorcar would cause them to gape in wonder as it roared and rattled its way past them. A floating platform powered by magic was routine. A simple pulley-driven elevator would be marvellous. Their technology was driven by the discoveries and knowledge of their artificers. These skilled artificers within this time of stability, peace and plenty created the first ever permanent interdimensional space, only 230 years after the Imaskari settled the fertile Roran Plateau. Sheltered by surrounding mountain ranges, their skill with ancient Batrachi technology was adapted to serve their culture in many practical ways, much like the invention of the wheel, so they had extra-dimensional grain houses and things like that. I'll read directly from the entry written by Brian R. James from the Grand History of the Realms with some annotations and additions. During the Nemrut period, from minus 8,350 to minus 7,975 DR, named for the civilization's first warlord, the Imaskari lived in tribal communities ruled by chiefs and the warrior aristocracy. The spread of agriculture during this time led to a rising population and the founding of many farming villages on the plateau. The founding of the imperial city of Anupras ushered in the early dynastic period from minus 7,975 to minus 6,422 DR, when Umyatan assumed the title of Lord Artificer and Emperor. During this period, the artificers used their knowledge of the massive bronze Bukhara spire circles to create a sprawling network of portals which allowed them to cross vast distances in the blink of an eye. These Bukhara spires allowed the whole legions to pass swiftly from one domain to the next, precipitating the rapid expansion of the Imaskari Empire across eastern Faerun. By the end of the early dynastic period, the empire's borders reached from the Great Ice Sea to the Golden Water, from the Alamba Sea to the Kara-Tur Plateau in Kara-Tur. First to fall to the burgeoning empire was the kobold tribes of Zexthandrim, followed by Korobakuru dwarves of Shan Nala. Subsequent campaigns brought about the subjugation of the Ta'angan steppe peoples and the annexation of Kati, Durpar and Ulgarth. Imaskar's first military defeat came in minus 6,788 DR, when its western outpost in Erelpar was besieged by forest landworms. A Ruador peasant rebellion followed in minus 6,779 DR, but the uprising was quickly put down, of course, by legions of troops. In minus 6,422 DR, rampaging Krakatoa, basically Godzilla-style kaiju monsters, razed the imperial city of Anupras, forcing the Imaskari to abandon their ancient capital. How the demon spirits entered the city is unknown, but popular opinion later placed the blame on the cult of Demogorgon, since Krakatoa first emerged from the Temple of the Gaping Maw in the city's centre, so pointing a big finger right there. The anarchy that followed split the empire into the Upper and Lower Imaskar, thereby beginning the Middle Kingdoms period of minus 6,422 to minus 4,370 DR, which was a good stretch of time. The natives of Lower Imaskar founded Solon as their new capital, and the ruling artificers maintained strict control there. The centre of Upper Imaskar's power was the capital city of Thakos, present-day Saikoi, which nestled within the Kotokoro Mountains. In minus 4,370 DR, a devastating plague racked Lower Imaskar, beginning the period of Shatra, from minus 4,370 to minus 3,920 DR, which means darkness in the Imaskari tongue. Ailing citizens flocked to temples throughout the empire, but their priests could not cure the plague. Even more mysteriously, the plague killed most of the empire's crops, bringing famine to the few who had survived the plague. This impact of the so-called Silent Death was catastrophic. Even in the most lightly affected areas, 15 to 20% of the population died. Impoverished and isolated, Lower Imaskar survived the following decade only because of the weakness and misfortunes of its enemies. In their bitterness, its people turned against the gods, and most priests were slain or driven into exile. The gods were never particularly strong in Imaskari culture anyway. Though the Silent Death did spread north into the region known today as the Endless Wastes, Upper Imaskar remained safe and untouched for the most part. With his population devastated and desperate to rebuild, Lord Artificer Khotan commissioned the building of 2 Bukhara spires. These twin portals gave access to another world, whose people had no command of the art of magic. During the next 4 centuries, the Imaskari abducted tens of thousands of humans from Earth and brought them to Faerun as slaves. This massive influx of slave labour restored productivity and prosperity to Lower Imaskar. Eventually, the slave population began to intermarry with the Imaskari, giving rise to the Mulan ethnicity. So the Mulan people were made up of people from basically Mesopotamia in one time period and a sort of Egypt or Middle East around another time period. So that's where this becomes rather important later on in the story. The reunification of Lower and Upper Imaskar under the strong hand of Lord Artificer Ormanond and the restoration of Inupris as the sole capital marked the start of the late period from minus 3920 to minus 2488 DR. Under orders from Ormanond, artificers created the Imaskar Kana, 7 great artifacts in which the Empire's immense magical lore was recorded for all eternity. The elite mages of Imaskar, foremost among them the archwizards Madriok and Hilatha, also rose to power during this period. 3 millennia before the Netherese discovered the Plane of Shadow, Madriok, the Ebon Flame, was busy cataloguing its dark secrets. It was there that Madriok crafted the Shadow Stone and set in motion his plan to overthrow Ormanond and seize control of Imaskar. Fortunately for the Empire, the young prodigy Hilatha, who would later become Halaster Blackcloak of Undermountain, confronted Madriok in the frontier fortress of Metos and ultimately trapped the Shadow Lord in the plane of imprisonment. The Imaskar civilization came to a violent end in minus 2488 DR. Unbeknownst to the Imaskari, the gods of the Mulan people had finally heard their people's prayers. Bypassing the Great Planar Seal, these gods sent powerful avatars known as manifestations of themselves to Toril, which is quite a feat for gods actually. The seal was put in place by the Imaskari artificers to basically block the divine prayers and things of their faithful from getting to those gods, so it was quite a feat for them getting there. Upon their arrival on the peaks of Taylor Shan, the God's Watch Mountains, they further divided their remaining divine essences and created lesser mortal forms of avatars, known as incarnations or devas or azimar as you prefer. These incarnations descended into the fertile plains of Imaskar and went among the long-forsaken people. The most talented they made priests, and the truly faithful were transformed into divine minions, building an army and fomenting rebellion as they passed. Within 10 days, most of the Empire's major cities were sacked. The final confrontation occurred on the palace steps of Inupris between Lord Artificer Yuvaraj and the Mulan god Horus, who emerged victorious. The incredible devastation of the area is evident to this day in the creation of the Roaran Desert. This spelled the end of Imaskar as a dominant power, but it's not the end of its people. Lord Hilatha, one of the last Imaskari artificers, escaped the fall of Imaskar by entering into a temporal stasis vault in a secret military stronghold deep beneath the western mountains, now known as the Giant's Belt Mountains. Lord Ilfamon and a small group of his family and retainers escaped into the uncharted corner of the Earthroot area of the Underdark, hoping to escape the fall of the Imaskar Empire and the wrathful Mulan slave armies who were butchering the Imaskari people. Ilfamon founded Deep Imaskar, and his descendants eventually came to rule Deep Imaskar for many centuries as kings and queens. Meanwhile, left without guidance after the fall of Imaskar, the subject states of Durpar and Gundavar, present-day Estegond and Var the Golden, fell into barbarism. The following years saw the collapse of the Western Imaskar Empire, though the eastern province of Kati and Kotokoru endured. Bearing Donus's shroud, one of the 7 false Imaskar Arcana, the artificer Kujawa claimed the dragon throne at Thaktos and declared himself Emperor of Anok Imaskar, and this actually marks the beginning of the first age of the Sholung dynasty and the expansion into Kara-Tur. While this new era of prosperity for the survivors of Imaskar occurs over the next few centuries, the borders of Imaskar expands to cover the vast area of the east, from the Celestial Sea to the north of the Sagara Sea in the south. Emperor Kajawa establishes the second capital at Tempat Larang to govern the empire's southern lands, and I should note, this era was also when Netheril was entering its golden age, far off to the northwest of Faerun, and it's one of the reasons why Netheril never expanded this far into the east, because Imaskar was still a power to be reckoned with. Back in the old territory, the god Ray founded the city of Skuld and gave it the name the City of Shadows, which soon became the capital of the new nation called Mulhorand. The lands of Imaskar began to abandon its southwestern lands due to volcanic eruptions that blanketed Tempat Larang in lava and ash, and the god Enlil discovered abundant pearls on the west coast of the Alamba Sea, so he decided to build Unthalas, the City of Gems, which became the capital of a new nation called Unther. These two nations, populated mostly by the Mulan people, are now considered to be the ancient empires of the East, so we're still a few thousand years before the present-day Forgotten Realms. Over the next 1,000 years, though, the whole area kind of exploded with draconic activity as the ancient Dragonfall War flares up again. The great era of conflict between Bahamut and Tiamat rages during the first millennium of the Empire of Unther. Tiamat's cult is brought to Faerun, at least among humans, by the Mulan, because Tiamat was part of the Mesopotamian culture as well. The clergy of Enlil is preaching that Tiamat is the nemesis of the gods, and she's blamed by the god kings for every setback Unther experienced as it rises to greatness and then decays over the centuries. Tiamat battles an Untheric alias of Bahamut known as Marduk the Justice Bringer time and again, but neither draconic god can prevail. At the same time, early on actually, the empire of Imaskar, its founder Kajawa, died in combat against the celestial dragon Tian Lung. Imaskar divided and dissolved into several warring states in a warring succession afterwards, among them Rakati, Chutakte, Maya Yuan, and Kaoshan, and that pretty much spells the end of Imaskar as any sort of power on the surface of the world of Toril, aside from some pockets of the ancient culture found in the Roaran Desert, but they eventually shrank down to just one kind of insignificant city-state among many. The relics of the once mighty Imaskar, just dusty old treasures clung to by a few people who dreamed of past glories, while the desert relentlessly swallowed up all the ruins. It wasn't until minus 1,400 DR that the first crewed ships sailed the open waters of the inner sea. I should mention that Unther began to expand across the Alamba Sea for the next 2,000 years, and these sailing ships were the standard model for open water travel around the Sea of Fallen Stars for a very long time. The Mulan people left the lands of the ancient Imaskar Empire primarily because they despised their former masters to such an extent they rejected all things Imaskari, even the land that they were forced to till themselves. So what remains of the once great, if often terrible, civilization? Well, it's mainly just ruins. The Imaskari built their cities and towns from a purple stone found naturally in the mountains surrounding the Roaran Desert. It's the extreme durability of the stone is the main reason why so many Imaskari ruins have survived to the present day. Such places are quite dangerous to explore, however, because of their many defences. Most ruined Imaskari cities and artificer towers are protected by constructs, usually golems, dedicated to guarding against intrusion. In addition, the Imaskari's great distrust of priests and gods led the Empire's artificers to erect clever spell wards and arcane traps that severely inhibited divine magic. Some of these wards punished spellcasters with a vicious backlash of arcane energy proportionate to the amount of divine energy released, so you could be trying to heal somebody and they get damaged. The priest will get damaged for the same amount. Portals and extra-dimensional spaces were common means of transportation in the heyday of the Empire, and many still exist within Imaskari ruins. Artificers also used portals to travel through their cities, and particularly wealthy ones would even use them to move about within their homes. Most slaves were forbidden access to the portals for obvious reasons, so they had to navigate cramped, narrow streets of Imaskari cities on foot. With the passage of years, most of these aging portals have become prone to malfunction and portal seepage, where the two locations linked by the portal begin to bleed over into each other. The presence of numerous portals in a single location creates impediments for explorers, since each doorway may connect with some unknown destination, not just within the world of Toril itself. Worse still, decaying portals of the elemental planes that once provided the Imaskari with heat and water now threaten to flood the surrounding areas with fire, ice, or even worse, due to the seepage. Some other sites of note are the drowned city of Baluan, which rests on a large island in Brightstar Lake, some 10 miles out from the shores of western Semphar. Baluan was a northern port of the city of Imaskar and a military centre of the Empire. The army stationed there served as the Empire's vanguard against frequent dragon invasions from the north. Many of Baluan's ruins extend into the lake and lie partially submerged under several feet of water. A well-preserved royal palace of rose-coloured stone with 7 slender minarets stands in the centre of the ruined city. The waters around this island, though, are infested with undead thanks to being created by a cult of the dead god Merkel, who were active there about a century ago. Then there is a place high in the Jorhat Mountains, northeast of the Roaran Desert, where there stands the shattered Imaskari castle, once known as the Jorhat Citadel. Though centuries of harsh climate and neglect have now reduced many of these structures to crumbling piles of rubble, the ruins still suggest a strength unknown in most modern-day fortresses, thanks to them obviously having massive amounts of magical power and slave armies that they could use to build these places. The stronghold was at once a sprawling complex consisting of numerous terraces, stairs, tunnels, and overhangs, where the Imaskari armies kept watch on the far eastern borders. So effective was this fortress that it was among the last redouts to stand against the Mulan rebellion. When the uprising reached its gates, the artificer Madava unleashed a mighty spell to defend Jorhat against Mulan slaves. The spell ended disastrously, though, killing both the attacking slaves and the citadel's defenders. Furthermore, the energies unleashed transformed Madava into an undead nightshade, and she has prowled Jorhat's lower levels ever since. The fortress, called Metos, was the westernmost outpost of the Imaskari Empire. The expansion of Imaskar was blocked by a psionic nation, which I will talk about in another video, because the sword cities are absolutely fascinating, and Kalimshan and all that stuff going on to the west is really interesting, and I'll get into that deeper at some later point, but I just can't do it in this video because we don't have all day. At the time, Methos was constructed in the Methwood. It was a sizable structure with enough extra-dimensional space to house 5,000 soldiers. Imaskari artificers created numerous demi-planes containing gardens and hunting grounds to make the complex self-sufficient. Access to any portion of Metos required the correct portal key for obvious reasons. The fortress was abandoned when Lord Artificer Yuvaraj recalled his armies to fight the Mulan slaves rebellion in the Central Lands. The Imaskari general stationed at Metos left the fortress virtually unmanned, confident that its complex portal defences could thwart any intruders. Persistent legends claim that Turami refugees fleeing the Mulan slaves somehow gained entry to the Imaskari fortress and dwelled there for centuries before migrating westward to the lands now known as Unther, Jacenta, and Turmish. An uncharted stone spire towering above the dunes of the Roaran Desert marks the location of Anupris, Imaskar's Imperial Capital. The Palace of the Purple Emperor near the city's heart is the finest known example of the Imaskari artificer's art with extra-dimensional space. The palace is 10 times bigger on the inside than the outside, and it contains hundreds of dimensional halls, vaults, and arcane chambers, including the Great Imperial Library. During the Slave Revolt, the Great Battle of Anupris took place high above the Imperial Palace. Lord Artificer Yuvaraj, wielding a fabled tome of the Imaskar rode his copper dragon mount into combat to join his artificers in a spectacular spell battle against the God Kings Gilgim and Anhur. The destructive arcane and divine energies released in that conflict razed the Imperial city and transformed Roaran into a desert. The palace of the Purple Emperor survived unscathed, presumably because it was protected by wards of epic magic. In the decade following the uprising, the sweeping sands of the Roaran Desert swallowed up the remains of Anupris as well as the Emperor's wondrous palace. Then, of course, we have the infamous northern region of the Roaran Desert. It's a vast wasteland of purple sand dunes, stone crags, and rocky badlands known as the Plains of Purple Dust. The fine purple sand radiates faint magic, a lesser legacy of the magic energies released during the epic spell battles that heralded the Empire's fall. Dozens of ancient arcane towers made of purple stone lie hidden among massive sandhills and extinct volcanic cones, and spectral mages, the undead remains of Imaskari artificers, haunt the Badlands. These volcanoes, by the way, were created by some of the spells that were unleashed. The area is also home to dangerous predators, most notably brown, blue, and brass dragons who infest this area. Several oases dot the northern edge of the desolate region, providing water and refuge for passing caravans. And you can also find wild sheep and camels and various other animals that live in this area. The ruined city of Ruador lies partially buried beneath fallen rock and desert sands on the western slopes of the Ruin Shield Mountains. The historical records of the Deep Imaskari indicate that the fourth Imaskar was lost here when the city fell. For miles around the ruins, the stench of decay fills the air. Few tales that exist about Ruador speak of an overpowering evil presence that rules the slithering creatures living in the city's slave tunnels. In fact, a solitary mind flayer Elder Brain now resides in Ruador. Long ago, this creature absorbed the last mind flayers of the community and began to go mad from centuries of isolation. The Elder Brain is sterile and unable to produce new tadpoles, but it is attended by 3 brain golems that hunt the mountains for goblins to drag back to their master for it to eat. Once a lush vale, and the area now known as the Ruin Desert was the birthplace of the Imaskari Empire, obviously. The majority of surviving Imaskari structures are found within this vast expanse of purple dust. So although the borders of the empire went on for a great distance, most of the ruins are concentrated around the purple sand dunes, topped with white salt caps extending in all directions. The titanic blocks of hardened lava that jut out of the sandy waste serve as an enduring reminder of the destructive forces unleashed by the God Kings and the artificers during the battles preceding Imaskar's fall. Untold numbers of forgotten Imaskari cities, strongholds and tombs lie deep beneath the sands of Ruin, lost to memory, to all but the denizens of Deep Imaskar. The Dust Desert is home to a number of rogue Efreet and Jinn, most of which are descendants of elementals enslaved by the Imaskari or refugees from far off Kalimshan. Purple worms and dragons, primarily the blue, brown and copper, also dwell here, making their lairs under the dunes and in the ruins. Ruined city of Solon lies east of the Ruin Shield Mountains on the northeastern edge of the Ruin Desert. Though Solon has been rebuilt twice over the centuries, it now lies in ruins once again. The cause of its most recent fall was a magically wrought eruption that covered the city with ash and magma a decade ago. Solon's ruler, Ambuchar Devaim, now a powerful lich, apparently caused the disaster through the misuse of an Imaskari artifact. Survivors reported that just prior to the eruption, the necromancer had unearthed a mysterious shrine dedicated to the darker para-elemental and quasi-elemental forces of ice, ash and vacuum. The shrine still remains, encased within a massive sphere of black stone, but let's not forget the artifacts. Thanks to being mostly indestructible, the oldest surviving relics of ancient culture endure in the present day. For the Imaskar Empire, the most famous relics are the 7 Imaskar Kana. But what are they exactly? Of the 7, only the barest details are known, and there are, well, you could easily lose yourself for many hours tracking down bits of information about the 7 Imaskara. I know I did. So there are so many different conflicting and confusing leads. Various writers have given bits of lore. For example, in his novel Dark Vision, Bruce R. Cordell had a painting in a ruin depicting Emperor Ormonond standing with 7 Lachey, lords of the ancient Fae, each of which shown carrying a magical tome. We know that the 3rd Imaskana is a massive book, weighing 10 pounds, a great tome bound in slate covers lined with blue dragon skin. Its pages vary in composition and appearance from raggedly cut vellum, skins of human, elf and even Tanari demons, and there are also pages, perhaps the original pages, made of some sort of crystal, magically altered to have the flexibility of paper with none of the paper's weakness. The tome is not read, but it can be asked questions, but beware. It must only be asked in the original language of the Imaskar, known as Ruashom, or it will suck the person into the book, where the skin of that person appears as another page. It's a horrible fate. The only way to restore them to life again is by use of a wish or a miracle spell. The book is a major artifact, thus can only be destroyed via very specific means, of which I have no idea what that is. It confers enormous spell resistance on any who carry it, and those who can command it may not only ask it questions as though via commune spell, they can also cast Meteor Swarm, Time Stop, Imprisonment, Dominate Monster, and who knows what other spell effects. If you cast Detect Magic on this huge book, it lights up like a Christmas tree. That info is from 3.5 edition Guide to the Underdark, which reveals the location of it's secure in one of the secret enclaves of Deep Imaskar. somewhere in the Earthroot region of the Underdark. From the Lost Empires of Faerun book, we know more about the first and the fifth Imaskar Arcana, but we don't know anything about the rest. The first Imaskar Arcana is a crudely wrought, crenellated crown forged from a strangely lavender-tinted metal. Though it was created for humans to wear, it also fits snugly when placed on the heads of other medium-sized humanoids. A blue-black star sapphire, about 3 inches in diameter, rests squarely in the front of the crown. The first Imaskar Arcana quickly became a symbol of the supreme authority wielded by the Imaskari emperors. Lord Artificer Yuvamaj was wearing it when he perished in battle against the manifested god Horus. The artifact is believed to lie deep under the sands in the ruins of Anupris, not far from the Imperial Palace. Anyone who wears the first Imaskar Arcana gains supreme spell resistance and is protected by a spell turning effect, which causes divine magic to just bounce off its wearer. Although there's a limit to exactly how much divine power it can deal with in a 24-hour period. I think it was up to 10 levels of spells. The first Imaskar Arcana holds the collected knowledge of the Empire's Lord Artificers and can answer many questions concerning Imaskari customs, politics, and magic. It does not engage in conversation, however. It's not intelligent, and offers only the briefest answers to direct questions regarding Imaskar only. It only knows what it knows. In addition, any wearer of the crown can use the following spell-like abilities. 3 times per day, they can use Anti-Magic Field, Blink, Legend Lore, which covers Imaskari items only, Greater Teleport, and True Seeing, and once a day they can open a gate. The crown's spell resistance and spell turning abilities are always active. Any other power might be commanded to function as a standard action, and the crown responds only to commands spoken in Ruashorm, or it will target the wearer instantly with a Feeble Mind spell. So these are not items that you go at without a thorough knowledge of the Ruashorm language. The fifth Imaskar Arcana, forged some 8,500 years ago, the scepter was traditionally carried into battle by the High General of Imaskar's armies. The final bearer of it, this fifth Imaskar Arcana, was Lord Dimmerond, the last general of Imaskar, who fell outside of Anupris before the enraged throng led by glorious servitors. So he was torn to pieces. The fifth Imaskar Arcana is a pitted, battered-looking scepter about 2 feet long and 2 inches in diameter. Crudely cut amethyst the size of a human fist crowns its bronze haft. The fifth Imaskar Arcana contains the entire military history of Imaskar from minus 7,500 DR onward. It telepathically answers any questions posed about that subject, the military history, to the best of its ability regarding Imaskar's military might, distribution, all the basic facts and figures. Anyone who wields the fifth Imaskar Arcana gains incredible spell resistance again, and can use the following spell-like abilities per day. 3 times a day they can use Charm Person, Crushing Despair, Confusion, Daze Monster, and Mind Fog. Some of those spells may not actually exist anymore. And once a day it can cause Blinding, cast a spell called Demand, which is very much like Command, Yesh, and Mass Hold Monster, and Power Word Stun. The scepter's spell resistance is always active, and any other power must be commanded to function as a standard action, but only, like the first Imaskar Arcana, the scepter responds only to words and commands spoken in Ruashorm. If a command is issued in any other language, the wielder instantly becomes the target of a disintegration effect. Items carried are unaffected, however, so it literally just ashes the person and all their goods fall to the floor. And that, my friends, is most of what is known of the Imaskar Empire. But it is not all that is known. In a future video, if you're interested, I'll talk about Deep Imaskar and the unique subrace of grey-skinned and magically skilled humans who dwell in secret pocket dimensions accessed only via secret portals in the Underdark, and the brief rise of a second Imaskar nation, again destroyed by cosmic events by way of the Second Sundering. Would you like to know more? Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Patreon for the full scripts for these videos, including a timeline of the Imaskar Empire that I've compiled for this video. Subscribed to Viewer Prime with my sign-up code AJ Pickett for the first 5 days free trial, and low price of $4 per month for the best content that I can upload there, as well as some of the channels on their ever-growing lineup. Buy some sweet merchandise from my Teespring shop. Wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.